I understand it could take a long time to answer this question. Definitely. We certainly need to do more than we have done up until now, but at least we need to focus our attention on two major aspects. First one, we need to constantly improve the environment and conditions of living here in the region. We need to create more workplaces. And secondly, we need to make sure that living in this region is comfortable and pleasant. And most importantly, we need to make sure that every single person, every single family has a clear understanding that this intention is here to stay, that the planning horizon is long. Our intentions are serious, and by staying and working here in the region, you will create great prospects for yourself and your children. So, seeing this future, seeing those prospects in the long run is crucial. First and foremost, we're interested in the influx of younger people here to the region. They are our future. We want them to set ambitious objectives, and we need to create necessary conditions for implementation of those goals. That's the major thing. And just one more question, if I may. You've already mentioned that the experience of the Far East in implementation of master plans will be scaled to other regions. How exactly will that happen? I've mentioned already that a certain novelty, if you could actually call it a novelty, is that we need to combine our spatial development and economic development. Because in the Far East and in Siberia, well, back in the Soviet times, how was the process structured? A factory would be built, an enterprise, and some very simple housing nearby. This is how small towns would emerge. There would be just one big enterprise, and around this enterprise, some kind of a small, hectic town would come up where people would live. This is the way how Baikal-Amur mainline would be built, and many other enterprises were evolving in this particular manner. Many regions were being shaped by those enterprises. Then the enterprise comes first, then some housing was built for people around it, and gradually, as the story would evolve, they would think what can be done additionally so that life of those people is actually a proper human life that is comfortable and pleasant. Well, the difference to the approach that we have for today is that both objectives have to be pursued in parallel. As soon as we start constructing a major enterprise or a factory, we need to think straight away where the people would live, what would be their careers, what we can offer to them in terms of culture, education, medical services, and those projects have to be launched straight away in parallel. I'm not even going to name them. I wanted to do that first, but I decided not to, because I'm sure not all of it is most probably completed exactly in the manner we expected to. I don't want to say something and then you would catch me by the word and say, well, this project is not actually finished. That is true. That may be the case. But the major principle is exactly as I stated, to do this work in parallel on creation of the infrastructure for people and development of industry and economy in the broadest meaning. Thank you. And now, as promised, I would like to give the floor to our distinguished guests. I apologize. I'm very sorry for interrupting. As I mentioned, there are 22 residential locations that we try to develop right now according to those principles. And generally, in the nearest years, we are going to focus on more than 200 locations all around the country. Thank you. And now it is my honor to give the floor to His Excellency Prime Minister of Malaysia. Your Excellency, Mr. Ibrahim, please proceed.
Здравствуйте. Dear President Vladimir Putin, Vice President of China, Han Zhou, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to President Vladimir Putin for inviting me to this preeminent and momentous forum here in Vladivostok.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome all the participants and the guests of the 9th Eastern Economic Forum. Russia and Vladivostok, in particular, as is tradition, hosts business people, technical and scientific teams, CEOs of leading companies and officials in the early September. those experts and entrepreneurs who show interest in the Russian Far East, as well as interest in the infinite opportunities this unique part of our country is opening up for creation and for mutually beneficial partnership. As we know, the development of the Russian Far East has been defined as our national priority for the whole 21st century, as our moderator has just pointed out. And life itself has confirmed the aptness and the importance of this decision. The challenges we are facing recently, as well as the trends we are witnessing in the world economy, all of that is testimony to the aptness of our decision. We see that business ties, trade routes, and vectors of development are reorientating towards the east and to the global south. And our Far Eastern regions provide us with a direct gateway to these promising and developing markets. They allow us to overcome the barriers some Western elites are trying to impose upon the whole world. And what's most important, the Russian Far East is a great space which helps realize your entrepreneurial initiative and launch projects, build new industries. The Far East, without exaggeration, is right now the most important factor for reinforcing Russia's positions in the world. It's the flagship of Russia in the global economic reality, and our future, to a large extent, will be dependent upon how fast the Russian Far East is developing. And this theme brings together around 100 events, panel sessions, and roundtables taking place as part of the Eastern Economic Forum. The forum brings together representatives of more than 75 countries and territories. These discussions are accompanied by substantial business dialogue. They result in concrete investment solutions and trade agreements. Just during the last 3 forums, more than 1,000 agreements have been signed to the tune of more than 10.5 trillion rubles. The Eastern Economic Forum has turned into a well-recognized platform for creating business ties and for discussing strategic issues related to the development of the Russian Far East and the Asia-Pacific as a whole. During my speech and my remarks, I'm going to talk about some concrete steps towards this goal. I'll talk about our proposals to foreign partners in terms of reinforcing investment, trade, production, and technological cooperation in the Asia-Pacific. I'm also going to talk about the results as well as the plans we've got in economy, in infrastructure, and in the social sphere in the Russian Far East. I'll talk about raising the standards of living for the citizens of Russia living here. I'd like to remind you that starting from 2013, we've got a new strategic partnership as well as a comprehensive development strategy for the Russian Far East. This approach has turned out to be efficient over the last 10 years. We have either launched or are planning to launch more than 3,500 industrial, infrastructural, and technological, as well as educational projects. We see that the investment in the Russian Far East is growing 3 times over the last 10 years. It's 3 times as high as the average across Russia. And we see the outcome of this investment. We've got around 1,000 new enterprises, 140,000 new jobs. The industrial output dynamics in the region is 25% higher than on average across Russia since 2013. We've got 16 advanced development territories, and the free port of Vladivostok special preferential regime has been set up in the Kuril Islands, as well as a special administrative district on Ruski Island, which is hosting this forum. Incidentally, this district has allowed us to get assets back to Russia from offshores and from foreign jurisdictions to the tune of more than 5.5 trillion rubles. More than 100 companies are currently residing in this district, and we are going to move forward and forge ahead, improving the business climate in Russia and in the Russian Far East in particular. We're going to stick to new, more efficient approaches to cooperating with our foreign investors here. During the last Eastern Economic Forum, we announced the establishment of international advanced development territories in the Russian Far East. They should provide globally competitive conditions for foreign investors, especially from foreign friendly countries. The first international advanced development territory is scheduled to be set up here in Primorsky region. Our Chinese partners are showing a great deal of interest in that, as well as the Republic of Belarus, which can participate in building a new deep-water port here in Primorsky district, and I would like to ask the Russian State Duma and the government to accelerate their work on the draft law which is required for setting up such advanced development territories. Another factor is another regulatory decision we are about to make. Starting from September the 1st this year, our legislation stipulates the possibility of using foreign standards in design and construction. Of course, I'm referring to the standards of those countries where the resilience and security requirements for construction works are at least at the same level of as ours, or stricter. I do hope this approach is going to be implemented here, in particular in the advanced development territories in the Russian Far East. Another important testimony to cooperation with foreign partners is the development of Bolshoy Ussuriysky Island in Khabarovsk region. We intend to build big logistics companies here, border checkpoints, build new roads. In May this year, during my state visit to the People's Republic of China, our Chinese counterparts and we have agreed to work jointly on this project. This will give a powerful impetus to the development of Khabarovsk and the region as a whole. I would like to ask the government to work through all the organizational and financial matters to start implementing this plan starting from next year, 2025. Of course, one of the key issues for launching initiatives in manufacturing, in residential construction and development, and in upgrading the transportation network, we need to have in mind the supply of energy. The electricity consumption in the Russian Far East is growing. Right now it stands at 69 billion kilowatt hours per annum. By the end of the decade, it's going to rise to 96 billion, and some settlements and districts and big investors are running into shortages of electricity, which puts a constraint on the construction of new residential areas and industrial facilities and infrastructure. I've already instructed the government to work with our big energy companies and business circles to draft a long-term program for developing the energy capacities in the Russian Far East, and we need to provide the tools for project funding. And through this program, we need to remove any shortages we anticipate in electricity supply in the Russian Far East. First and foremost, through commissioning new electricity facilities such as Nizhny hydropower plant in our Morsk region. It'll provide energy to the region and to the eastern polygon of the Trans-Siberian Railroad. It'll help protect the territories against freshets, and I would also like the government to think about building NPPs in the Russian Far East. We spoke about that yesterday, and this plan should take into account both the current needs as well as the needs we anticipate in future among the business and our citizens, and of course it should take into account the long-term goals. And it should also reinforce the transportation and logistical capacities of the Russian Far East. The most important project in that regard is the expansion of the Eastern Polygon. Over the last 10 years, both in the Trans-Siberian Road and Baikal-Amur mainland, we have laid more than 2,000 and have upgraded more than 5,000 kilometers by the building or rebuilding more than 100 bridges and tunnels through Lena, Bureya, Selinga rivers. By the end of this year, the throughput capacity will have risen to 180 million tons. This year, we have opened a new third stage for the development of this transport network. We have already started doing that. We need to remove the bottlenecks, commission more than 300 facilities, such as the relief roads for Severomoysky, Kuznetsovsky, Kodarsky tunnel, as well as the bridge over the Amur River. But of course, this is even a more large-scale task because we need to create a second main track along the length of all of the Baikal-Amur mainland. We need to create 2 tracks for the Baikal-Amur mainland, and we have to electrify it along all of its length. In the next 8 years, we need to lay 3,100 kilometers of the railroads. Just to draw a comparison, it's the same length that was laid when the Baikal-Amur mainland and the Trans-Siberian Road were built, and the same as was laid when the Baikal-Amur mainland was being constructed from 1974 to 1984. So currently we are building a project which, in terms of its scale, is bigger than the biggest infrastructural project of the USSR, which used to be built by all the republics of the USSR, and their forces were very strained back then. So, like the Trans-Siberian Road, we need to build a new road transport corridor from St. Petersburg to Vladivostok. And I'm not just talking about increasing the throughput capacity and improving the quality, because it'll also give an impetus to internal and domestic tourism, because this road is gonna go through dozens of Russian regions. There are several stages. Last December, a new road was built between Moscow and Kazan. By the end of the year, it will have stretched to Yekaterinburg and then onwards to Tyumen. They're going to be built bypasses for Omsk, Novosibirsk, Kemerovo, and Kansk. Further on, once the road has reached Vladivostok, this corridor will have stretched by more than 10,000 kilometers, including connections to border checkpoints with other countries. I'd like to remind you about the instruction I gave in my address to the Federal Assembly, namely to decrease the queues at the border and decrease the time for inspection of freight transport. It should be no longer than 10 minutes. In the railroad checkpoints, we have already reached a very good rate in terms of the time needed for inspection. In the Eastern Polygon and in other roads, railroads and roads, we have already started large-scale works, engaging professionals, engineers, designers across different regions of the country, and through their dedication they show that Russia is willing and can build fast and at a high quality, implementing infrastructural and transport projects of a national and global scale. I refer in particular to the Northern Sea route as an international logistics route. Over the last 10 years, the cargo throughput has increased by whole magnitude. Back in 2014, the cargo throughput stood at 4 million tons, whereas last year it rose to 36 million, which is 5 times the record registered during the Soviet times. We are going to improve the throughput capacity, and in particular through exploring the Arctic mineral deposits, reorienting the cargo, and increasing the transit. We have a big plan for developing the Northern Sea route, building icebreakers, increasing our satellite constellation, improving the coastal infrastructure, building emergency and rescue centers to pilot these logistical routes. 2 years ago, we launched coastal voyages along the Northern Sea route. Right now, this voyage includes 14 ports in the Russian Northeast, the Arctic, and the Russian Far East. Last year, the capacity of the Russian ports in the Northern Sea route exceeded 40 million tons. This is but the beginning. We're going to increase these capacities further, modernizing the transshipment capacities, expanding the close and far distance railroad connections, which will allow us to increase the capacity of the Murmansk transport hub to 100 million tons, and then even higher than that. Our Eurasian integration partners are interested in developing Murmansk as a transportation hub. Our colleagues in Belarus are contemplating the development of port infrastructure and building their own terminals on the Kola Peninsula, and would like to invite other countries to participate in this project. And I think, and I see there is an interest there. All large-scale transportation and logistics initiatives Russia is pursuing are built using cutting-edge engineering, digital and environmental solutions, which creates an additional demand for the products produced by Russian machine builders and metal companies. It also creates a demand for the services provided by science and high-tech businesses based on cutting-edge approaches, taking into account the new level of quality of technological, economic, and educational capacities of the country. We need to pursue the strategic task of developing the Russian Far East. In particular, we need to further explore the subsoil resources of the Russian Far East, because currently all of Russian tungsten and tin, fluorite, as well as boron-containing ores are produced in the Russian Far East. It accounts for 80% of all of Russian diamonds and uranium, more than 70% of silver, and 60% of Russian gold. There are other key centers for production of these resources in Yakutia and Chukotka. There, the deposits have been explored for quite some time, and their capacities are limited, whereas the demand is constantly growing. So we need to ensure both the export and the domestic market. We need to ensure this resource sovereignty of the country. We need to provide uninterrupted supply of commodities and raw materials for our economy, for our settlements, providing them with fuel and commodities. We need to use most efficient Russian technologies and scientific discoveries in environment and management of natural resources. When I spoke here at the forum last year, I instructed the government to draft specific programs for surveying the mineral resources of the Russian Far East and Siberia. They should be part of the federal project, Geology, Reviving the Legend. These programs are ready. We estimate that 1 ruble of government expenditure is going to attract 10 rubles of private investors, and this money is going to be paid back, and the profits are going to be great. There's going to be comprehensive effect, but we need to do that timely, understanding the timing of the investment. So I'd like to ask the government to provide the necessary funds in the federal budget for the next triennium at a level which is adequate for the goals we are pursuing, because we need to improve the geological surveying of the Russian Far East by several times. I talk about titanium, lithium, niobium, and rare earths, which are requisite for the economy of the future. We have all of those resources available. The potential of these industries will improve the attractiveness of the regions, create new jobs, improve connectivity and logistics. The potential is great. Will help create cutting-edge creative industries in the Russian Far East, help build the infrastructure for the big data economy and AI, for piloting UAVs for commercial purposes and civilian purposes. In order to tap the technological progress potential, we will continue to improve the scientific and educational potential of the Russian Far East. This region has already launched the construction of university campuses in Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk and in Khabarovsk, but that is not sufficient for the Russian Far East. I suggest we should embark upon several new projects, such as university campuses in Ulan-Ude, Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, and Chita. A new batch of construction is going to be implemented here for the Russian Far Eastern Federal University in Vladivostok. It'll have all the conditions for youth entrepreneurship and business incubators. We'll also develop universities in the Arctic. Apart from Archangel campus, we'll build a similar project in Murmansk. Also, on the basis of these campuses, we will launch cutting-edge engineering schools. 2 such schools in Sakhalin and Vladivostok have already been set up. They're meant not just to train specialists for industry and agriculture, transport and social sphere, and for the AI. They're also meant to come up with original innovative solutions for scaling new solutions in social sphere and management and in economy. Russky Island has been hosting the Scientific and Technical Center of Rushydro for the last 2 years and specializes in innovative solutions in global energy, which are used for the technological upgrade of the energy sector in the Russian Far East. Our leading companies will also help build a big innovative technological hub on Russky Island based on the Far Eastern Federal University. It'll concentrate on research and practical solutions in marine engineering, biotechnology, biomedicine, and other promising avenues to be pursued. I would like to ask the governments from the government and from Primorsky region to use the tool of a Far Eastern concession for the implementation of this project. I would also like to ask them to think about the tools for attracting scientists from Russia and from other countries. I refer to competitive motivational projects as well as the social packages for the specialists and their families.
Distinguished colleagues, we understand the success of implementation of our plans here in the Russian Far East and all over Russia depends first of all on people, on Russian families. I have said many times, we should not be guided by old logic. First we build plants and factories, and only then we'll think about those who work in these enterprises. Such logic is not just. It does not function in the modern economy, in the economy of the future that is being constructed around people. That is why, together with the new economic plans for the Russian Far East, we have also started major social initiatives. We have launched the mechanism of a unified subsidy. Thanks to it, we build and repair schools, kindergartens, clinics, hospitals, sports facilities. Urban environment is being improved as well as infrastructure. Today, we have already built almost 2,000 social and infrastructure facilities. Unified subsidy has become a powerful financial leverage for the mechanism of a Far Eastern concession. Its task is to attract private investment to social projects. Business companies have already invested more than 120 billion rubles for these purposes, and 36 such initiatives are already being implemented. For instance, here in Primorsky region, a year-round ski resort is being built. In Lanoda National Museum and Theatre, in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, a new public center is going to appear. In Khabarovsk, an art museum. In Magadan and Chita, sport facilities are being built. There, in Chita as well as in Birobidzhan, urban lighting is being fully modernized. Of course, we'll continue to support the work of Far Eastern concession. We'll keep adjusting it for the benefit of citizens and for the opportunities of business. What I would like to underline as well, today, in the context of the state and private partnership, schools, airports, bridges, highways are being built all over the country. Public transport is being renewed, but the volume of such projects is not very high, less than 3% of GDP or 4.4 trillion rubles. To develop this sphere more intensively, we need to improve relevant legislature and the mechanism of work of the state and private partnership. We should make the risks for all the parties, the authorities and the business transparent, and they should be divided in a just way. For instance, when we implement publicly important projects, knowing the experience and established practices on the projects of technological sovereignty, I propose that the Corporation of Development, VEB.RF, be one of the obligatory participants of the project in state and private partnership. The corporation would control the system of risk allocation. It would confirm the benefit of the project for the state as well as for the business. We have already spoken about this with Sergei Ivanovich, and the corporation is ready for that. The same goes for the project of financing, project financing factory that stimulates private investment. So I ask the government, together with VEB, determine the specific parameters and scale for deals in the context of state and private partnership that should be implemented with the obligatory participation of the VEB. Going further, it's important for the private investment to be attracted, having long-term plans of development of industries and territories, as well as our settlements, cities, towns and villages for their comprehensive development. That is why we actively promote principally new instrument to improve the quality of life of people. They are called master plans. Many people know about it. Our Russian colleagues mostly know about that. We have already confirmed such plans for 22 administrative centers and urban agglomeration of the Russian Far East, where more than 4 million people live.
Hello! Please नया smooth lassi देना. Best choice. So creamy, so delicious, so refreshing, so smooth. नया smooth lassi ले लो. Full on refreshment.
तुम नारी हो, लचीली कमर, नाजुक कंधे.
हम क्या है दुनिया को दिखाएं ऑप्टिमम न्यूट्रिशन के साथ जीत को हासिल कर जाएं। ऑप्टिमम न्यूट्रिशन अपने अंदर की ताकत जगाओ।
On your podcast, let me tell you the story. Every other Indian publisher, no one agreed to publish it, only for the fact that it had been Hindu.
I wanted to read books on India and Hinduism. All the books were either written by white people who are not Hindus, who usually were Marxists, or were written by Indians who were brown but were Marxists.
We could count endless number of times that the BJP has lost. It has lost major states. What does that show us? It shows that the people of India choose whatever government they want.
Culture in the United States of America is you have arrived when you become white. Indians have become white adjacent. The problem with the Hindu community is every time they are faced with the question of caste, they come up with these tomes of apologia.
I believe India's rise is inherently peaceful, and therefore every attempt will be made to stop India's rise.
India is a union of states. There was no India. There was no continuing civilization. There is no cultural identity. That is a side that has a Stockholm syndrome. Because that is the same side that denies the record of Islamism in India. I'm very specific about my word. It's Islamism.
Sardar Patel himself never claimed to be right-wing. It's something that the left, even in his time, created. I do not consider myself right-wing. I'm a practicing Hindu.
India does not have a right-wing is because India celebrates poverty. I am the right-winger in this podcast, right?
Namaste, Jai Hind. Welcome to another edition of ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Today my topic is on the war of narratives, because there's been a view that since 2014, when Mr. Modi came to power, and then in his second term, there's been a rewriting of history, and this history is with a bias. Whether there is an overhaul of narratives that is taking place, where certain facts were suppressed then, and as a result, have we all grown up with a contrived narrative, and whether this new narrative will create more fissures in our society. I have with me Hindol Sengupta, who's a scholar and a historian. He's written 10 books, including an award-winning